Derek Wheatley, and welcome to episode 190 of the Wheatley podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thanks very much for listening last week, by the way. It was a kind of a very long project that I thought was going to take me 2 hours. It took me about 4 days, but if you haven't listened to it, it's all about music. My favorite songs for every year that I've been alive, and I've been alive longer than I look like I've been alive, and it did take me way too long to do it because I got a little bit obsessive about it. I really wanted to get it right. So go back and listen to that if you haven't done so already. You can buy us a coffee and all that, link in the description. Anyway, let's get into this week's guest. He is an MMA fighter and the head coach at the King's Court Academy, Andrew Barrett. How are you doing, Andrew?
Very, very good, Derek. Thanks for having me on.
More than welcome. I'm delighted to have you on. One of the people that when I chatted to you, I thought, why haven't I had Andrew on about 100 episodes ago? It doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? Like, it just kind of escapes your mind, especially when I'm following SBG and yourself and seeing you up there and all that. And it for some strange reason, it never happened. I don't know if this is just kind of a random one for UFC fans. I don't know if you got to see any of the fight last night.
I did, yeah. No, I got to see Adesanya and Strickland, and yeah, there was some
That's
nuts.
very, like, I found out the result early on this morning, and I was out running afterwards, and I thought to myself, like, when you think through big shocks and surprises in the UFC, that's got to be like right up there.
It was definitely a strange one, definitely one you wouldn't necessarily predict. But the adjustments that were being made in the fight were like beautiful. I think definitely Strickland's coach Eric's probably not given nearly enough credit for what he does. Like, one, reining in a madman and making sure that he's on the right path, and then the other thing is that giving him the right strategy.
Yeah.
I think personally what I saw was that Strickland came to beat Adesanya, and Adesanya came to beat Adesanya, and it backfired on him. I think at the level of the sport that those two are at, you have to be tailoring your game to beat another person. You can't just be coming in to beat you.
Yeah.
That's probably something that's okay at the amateur scene when you're competing at a lower level and you're just you're changing all the time and people are having a hard time adapting to you. But once you hit a certain level, you're kind of a more finished product. People know what your weaknesses, they know what your strengths are, and they definitely exploited a lot of what Adesanya's weaknesses were. Definitely a lot better than I would have thought previous to it.
I saw Strickland. The last time I saw Strickland, he was fighting Pereira, who is a great kickboxer, obviously. And he was terrible, Strickland was. And he stood there and he just like tried to just punch him hard. And like, people will appreciate that I know very little about, kickboxing and stuff. I haven't done it. But when you watch a certain amount of it, you kind of go, oh, that looked a bit better than the last guy I saw. And then when I watched the fight this morning, I was like, that looked like a different fighter this morning, last night than he was, whatever that was, a year ago, maybe. And yeah, obviously, like you said, goes down to the coach as well, like the adjustments.
Well, it's an important thing to remember that mixed martial arts is an art, and you know, people always seem to have this misconception about art in general that it always has to be pretty, and Strickland's art is not pretty
Yeah,
in the slightest. But there's a big difference. There's a big difference between, like, effect and look.
yeah.
And Adesanya looks right, and Strickland doesn't. But the effect on both sides are both serious, and again, he made the right adjustment, and he put on a beautiful performance, even if it was ugly in its own right.
Absolutely, it did the trick. Listen, Andrew, let's get into it. So, we always ask the first two questions. Can you give us a history of your upbringing, please?
Yeah, of course. I was homeschooled my whole life, so the only time I've stepped in a school was ironically to teach at those schools. So I've never stepped in a school to learn myself. I was homeschooled my whole life, and two things you'll know about homeschoolers, that everybody does know a homeschooler. They have two qualities to them. One is terrible haircuts. And then the other one is they are always particularly passionate about one subject. They always find
Okay.
something that they just love more than anything else. And when I was growing up, I hated and despised sports. Like I thought they were disgusting. It was like hard work and sweating, and it all seemed like a rotten idea. But the thing that I loved more than anything was games,
Mm.
anything that pitted two minds against each other. So like I remember like as young as 4 challenging like everybody in any house, anybody that visited, to a game of chess. And I lost nearly all the
Okay.
time, and I was harassing them constantly to play it. And as I genuinely didn't care if I lost. I just wanted to like keep getting better at it, keep getting better at it. And that and card games were always something that I was like very, very passionate about. Um, I went to my first karate class when I was 12.
Mm.
And I remember them explaining to me just something really bog standard, a set up, how the jab sets up a right hand. And I remember that being like my eureka moment. Like everything just like clicked in my head. I was like, this is a game. I was like,
Mm.
this isn't a sport. Like this is a game. And at that point I just like fell in love like you wouldn't believe. Like I went home and I took every book out of the library. I watched every video I could find. I like tried to talk to every person that might even have the slightest interest in martial arts about it. And I think that's something that is very unique to homeschooling as a way of being raised, is that it does give us the space to obsess about something. And obsession's nearly sometimes considered a bad thing. But in this case it was definitely a really positive thing for me. As I got a little bit older, I found that I found karate very restrictive. I
Okay.
was coming in with ideas because I didn't care where I learned my information from. I didn't care if it was taekwondo, karate, jiu-jitsu. I just would come in with these like takedowns from different sports. And I remember like black belts nearly pulling their hair out of their head, being like, this guy again, like he's going to come in with a new technique now. I'm going to have to give out to him and tell him not to use it. And I remember getting so frustrated with that. I remember being like this doesn't make any sense. Like we're drawing like imaginary lines on the ground and trying to keep ourselves inside this box that just doesn't add up. And I kept going to different martial arts, and every martial art had the same problem. It was like, the judo guys only wanted to do judo, and the
Yeah.
karate guys only wanted to do karate. And then when I was 16, I found mixed martial arts, and it just made so much sense to me. The idea that you come in with something and you're judged purely on the fact, does it work? That's it.
Yeah.
Does it work?
Do
And you're
you
not asked any other question.
that's an interesting way to put it, actually. Like, does it work? Because I
Mm,
think you hear a lot of new people coming in, and I suppose it's not always an age thing, but I think sometimes you'll find with younger people, it's like, but would this work on the street, or would this? And it goes beyond what we're really trying to focus on. We're like, well, if he didn't have the gi on and he was wearing a hoodie, would I be able to, and it's like, well, let's not like jump too far ahead. It's like, we'll just figure out what we're doing in here, and look. And I understand. And look, I have loads of questions coming up about that. Just the one thing on the homeschooling thing. Did you feel that you missed out on anything? Did you ever feel that with like social aspects and things like that you missed out?
Yeah, ironically, that's the first question everybody always
Yes.
asks. Is like, what about social? And the answer is always nearly the same, which is like, do you like talking to me? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
are you one of those people that are like, oh God, like here comes Andrew again? I'm sure there's a few people there like, oh
Hey,
no, not this guy again. Um, but I think people like point to maybe like a 12-year-old that's homeschooled and be like, he's really awkward or he's really anxious. And my answer to that would be like, point to someone who's in school that's 12 and tell me that they're not really anxious and
mhm.
they're not having trouble socially. Like everybody does at that age to a certain extent. You know, there's a rare few that don't, but most people do when they're younger. Um, uh, we had ways of, like, you know, making groups and making friends, but I think one of the things that kind of is very different from homeschooling is that we never really had a sense of like age with
Yeah.
us. Like, there's no problem being friends with someone that was 16 when you were 12. There's no
Hmm.
problem being like friends with someone that was older than you, younger than you. Talk to adults the same way you talk to children. There was no like kind of gap in that kind of way. Like, I genuinely think the biggest thing that I've noticed is only benefit, and the
Right.
biggest benefit is freedom to um, figure out and explore what kind of person you actually are. And I think a lot of times what I've noticed is kids only start doing that when they've just finished leaving cert.
Mm.
It's like, now I'm going to figure myself out. Now I'm going to figure out what kind of person I am, because I've been ordered to a position in a place for my entire life. I've been told what to do, and now there's this like moment where it's like, now I'm the one that decides what to do, and it's kind of a panicked feeling for a lot of them. And I've noticed this with, like, you know, a lot of the people that have come through the gym is like they get so much better, like once that pressure is, like, you know, taken
Yeah.
off them. With us, especially the way I was homeschooled, we don't necessarily learn so much structurally. We learn whatever we're passionate about at that time. And I'm sure everybody's had this experience that if you're really interested in something, you find it so easy to learn that. And if you have no interest in it, it's torture.
Hmm.
And most people don't realize that there will always come a point where you're really interested in something that you thought you'd never be interested in. You know, like, I always think of, like, you know, when I was younger, like, I didn't care about nutrition in the slightest.
Mm.
And if anyone started explaining it to me, I'd be bored out of my teeth. But then I get a little bit older and fighting becomes really important to me. And that's the way to get to the next level. And then all of a sudden, this thing that if you told me when I was 12 to do this, I would have been bored out of my teeth. Now I'm a little bit older. It's so easy to absorb because
Yeah.
I care about it so much. So I only did things that I cared about, that I loved. And I think that's the gift that homeschooling kind of gave me, was to be able to always learn and be passionate about whatever I was learning.
Can't argue with any of that. Um, Also, Andrew, when did you first become aware of mental health?
Um, I always think, whenever I think about something like that, I always think, you know, in 2 days' time, I'll be like laughing at Andrew Barrett from 2 days ago, being like, that guy knew about mental health. Like, you
Yeah.
know, he thought he knew what he was talking about. And um, I think the first time that I probably started becoming aware of it was when I was like 10 or 11. And there was a lot of trouble at home. There was a lot of stuff that we were going through. And I remember, you know, I was like, especially from like 10 to like probably 16, I was like an
Mhm.
angry little child, you know, screaming and shouting and roaring and crying. And I think a lot of people, if they took a look at me, they would go like, that kid's a headache, he's a monster, stay away from him, whatever. But my mother's response was completely different. I think she saw me for what I actually was, which was, you know, a scared little kid that was annoyed that he didn't have enough power or
Mhm.
control over the situation to help the people he cared about so much. Um, and she was someone who always encouraged me to cry. And she was someone that always encouraged me to shout and to scream and let all of that out, not bury it inside my chest. Um, when I got a little bit older and I felt like I was finally at that point where I was like, you know, 20, maybe 21, and I was like, you know, I get it now. It all
Mhm.
makes sense to me. I understand this. I like I noticed that every time I would lose a competition or I would lose a fight, I would turn in on myself, and it was like nearly like I was regressing back into, my childhood. I was very like hateful towards myself. And I think that something that's said all the time, and I think it's a great saying, is that you should treat other people the way you want to be treated. But I think a lot of times that for a lot of people, that saying needs to be reversed on its head. It needs to be, you should treat yourself the same way you treat everybody else. And when I started coaching, I realized that when one of my fighters would lose, I would be the most compassionate person in the room. I would be upset for them. I'd be as upset as they were when they lost. I'd be there crying with them for what they were going through, because I understood how much it hurt that they lost. And then I stopped myself and I went, why, when they lose, are you so compassionate to them? And then when you lose, you tell yourself that you're a loser and you're not cut out for this. And you keep telling yourself you're special, but you're not special. And I used to say horrible, horrible things to myself. And when I switched that on my head and I realized all I needed to do was treat people the way I treated other people, ironically, I started winning everything because that weight was taken off my back, and I didn't realize it was holding myself, I didn't realize it was holding myself back. I think it's like, if you were born with weights on your back, you wouldn't know the difference between the weights being off and the weights being on. And then when someone takes them off that day, everything clicks and you go, is this what everybody else feels like, when they're not restrained by this thing? And then again, I was like, I got it now. I understand it, a bit of self-love, take care of yourself. I understand. And then I got a little bit older and I was again going through some stuff. And and this was probably not even that long ago, I started going to a therapist, a wonderful woman. And honestly, most of what she does is call me out on my shit, call me out on things that I'm like, I'm acting and I'm not actually being really me. And something that I noticed was that, or she noticed, was that I wasn't vulnerable with people. I was always kind of like, I was always acting like the tough man. I was always acting like someone who had everything under control. And because of that, I was denying, it's quite selfish when you think about it, I was denying everybody in my life the satisfaction of really truly getting close to me. I was always like fighting through. I wasn't letting anybody in. And I wasn't able to be the person I needed to be to help all the people that I love in my life. And I really feel like I let a lot of people down because I did that. And my biggest focus now is on being more open with people, on being more genuine. And a lot of times you find you're afraid that if you tell people that you're vulnerable, people will turn around and they'll belittle you for it, or they'll pull you down. And usually what I've noticed when you're vulnerable with people, even strangers, is that they go, oh my God, that's me. And they are suddenly able to be vulnerable with you because of it. And so my biggest focus is on right now with my mental health is being more vulnerable to people, being more caring to people. But I do know that like in 2 months' time, I'm going to tell you, oh yeah, like I handled a lot of that and I've worked myself through that, but I found this new thing I need to work on so badly. It is a journey. It's not something that you can ever really figure out. And it took me a while to even figure out that I wasn't going to figure it all out at any time.
I think, listen to you talk about like from when you were, 10, with these kind of feelings, and maybe you didn't quite understand them, but obviously you were thinking about them, and you obviously think about them quite deeply now. I was thinking about them earlier on, how I feel since I started training in fusion, and it was 6 years ago today. And we were talking before we recorded, and I was terribly nervous on the mats and stuff. And I tried to think of my first day, and I tried to think of the last day I was in there, Friday. And the difference in my, it's not really a difference in personality, but it's a difference in letting that personality out and being, like you said, I think it's a massive thing for a coach. Now I teach a bit the fundamentals in jiu-jitsu. So a coach should be vulnerable,
Hmm.
because I think I personally can't go on the mats and act like I know everything. So if someone says to me, well, I keep getting stuck in this position and someone's trapping my arm and I can't get out, I'm not going to bluff to them that I know what I'm talking about if I don't know what I'm talking about. And that's just a little, obviously, just an example of vulnerability on the mats. When you think back to when you were 16, you started MMA. What do you think you've learned about yourself off the mats
Oh, if the mat's true martial
through
arts.
martial arts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, like honestly, like like so much. It's hard to even like wrap. I live my life so much healthier from it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the biggest thing is that, and I always say it's the biggest thing I would give to beginners, the thing I would say to all of them and hope that they learn it a lot faster than it took me to learn through martial arts, was that there's a big difference between being hateful towards yourself and being critical.
Mm-hmm.
And I find people mix those two up so often. People are like, but I have to be hard on myself because they maybe see a lazy person and they're like, I don't want to be like that person. That person never judges themselves. I need to judge myself. But there's a huge difference. When my fighters would lose their fights, I wouldn't come out to them and go, you did everything right.
Mm.
You're just unlucky. Because if I did that, that's not going to serve them whatsoever. But if they came out and I, started dogging them and
Mm-hmm.
told them they were terrible and, they really just didn't have it and they're not really a fighter and, we need the real people to come in and fight and you need to leave, I would destroy them.
Mm-hmm.
There is a healthy middle ground there. There's a difference between being critical where I sit down and I go, well, we did this and this wrong and this is how we're going to solve it. So you don't have to worry about it. We have a plan laid
Mm-hmm.
out and we're going to fix all of these problems. And it's not something wrong with you as a person. It's something wrong with your application. That's it. Separate those two things from
Yeah.
yourself rather than identifying as a loser, which is like, a horrible thing that a lot of people do to themselves. You want to look at what you did wrong in the action and separate that from you as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably for me it would be the biggest thing that I've learned from martial arts.
It's it's amazing that you put it that way, because it's something that I do think about a lot and probably couldn't have put it as well as you did. But I think that idea of, you know, we can talk about competitions and then we can talk about training. But in my mindset, it's just training. So it's not up there at the kind of level where where say I'm going to like really, like you said, dog myself about it. But I think when I have a bad day training, I'm like, I immediately go to, I don't deserve this belt, or I don't deserve the stripes in this belt because this person's got a lower belt than me and he smashed me there. And it's like, it puts this 5 minutes of rolling and then you create this whole narrative around it. And like, and I'm 41, like, so I can't imagine what younger people are doing because, again, there's different things to depending on obviously male, female, black belt, white belt, all there's different factors that come into it. Like it doesn't really change how we think about how we are in the training. And the way you described what, about, and you described it in your first answer about like vulnerability and stuff. It's kind of a wonderful thing to have with regards to MMA and training. When you're training under someone like Kieran Davern, because he's a very, high level, obviously, of jiu-jitsu. We've had him on the podcast and he was brilliant to talk to. How is that like training under someone like that kind of good and someone who's competing professionally as a jiu-jitsu fighter?
Well, like to go back to the thing that you said
Hmm.
about you teaching and someone asking a question, the first time I realized Kieran was like, there's two things that clicked with me that I was like, Kieran's going to be my coach.
Hmm.
Um, the first thing was I asked him a question and he didn't know the answer to it. And he said, I'll figure that out for you. You know, well, I never had that experience with a coach before. I had like people bluff me, and I'm a
Yeah.
smart man. I know when someone's bluffing me, and they're like, "Well, you see," and they explain it, and you're like, "That doesn't answer the question at all. Like, why are you trying to pretend? I don't care if you. I'm just looking for answers."
Yeah.
Um, but they feel that it's a hurt to their ego, and Kieran never had that.
Hmm.
Kieran quite often would just say, I'm not sure, but I'll figure it out. That's a very good question. I'll figure it out. And a lot of times he did have the answer, because I find that when people put themselves in a situation where they tell themselves, I don't know,
Hmm.
they have a lot of the answers, because they've put themselves in that situation throughout their life so often that they figured it out so many times. The person who doesn't stick their hand up in class and ask a question, that's the person that's never going to get any better.
Yeah.
And they do it because they're like, I don't want to look like the idiot that doesn't know this.
Yeah.
But the sad thing and the sad truth is you are the idiot that didn't even ask the question. If you stuck your hand up, if you're in a good place, if you're in a good, healthy environment,
Yeah.
people will give you an answer. They'll explain you through it and they'll help you out. Um, the other thing I noticed with Kieran, um, and this is something that I, as a coach, want to bring to my game more than anything, was I remember watching, and he's quite a famous coach. He's a well-known coach. I watched one of his fighters fight on a show, and his fighter got like knocked out, like terribly knocked out, and um, he strolled in like nothing
Mm.
happens, like calm, as cool as a cucumber. And I remember being like, never with him.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care what name he has. I was like, I don't want to be his student, never. And but at the same time, when I saw it, I was confused. I was like, maybe this is what coaching's like. Maybe eventually people get like this. And then I remember later on that night, one of Kieran's fighters lost, and he didn't lose terribly badly, but he lost. And I could remember hearing, and I was in the back of the crowd, clear as day, Kieran coming in, head down, apologizing that he didn't do enough for his student, and that he was going to go home, he was going to fix everything.
Mm.
And that's something that strikes me in a good gym. You know, if I lose a fight, my teammates are devastated and ask themselves what they did wrong.
Mm.
Shane Smith, my strength and conditioning coach, goes home and he goes, what did I do wrong? Kieran goes home and he goes, what did I do wrong?
Hmm.
They literally stay up all night trying to figure out what they did wrong. They blame themselves rather than blaming me. And I was the one that was in there doing it all. And when you have a team like that when something goes wrong, when someone loses, everybody loses.
Yeah.
And when someone wins, everybody wins. You can't help but succeed when you're in a situation like that. And I want to grow the same kind of environment in my gym.
I think, obviously I've been at Kieran's seminars. I've trained a couple of times in Tullamore, but Martin has trained under Kieran for a long time. And I got to see that in jiu-jitsu competitions with Martin, that he, say there's six competing in an event, and he'll come back from it. He'll say, well, nobody was getting out of this position, or nobody. So then he's taken on that idea, like you said, well, Kieran's doing, he's taken on that. Well, if none of them are doing it, I'm not either not showing it properly, we don't go over enough, whatever it might be. Now we're going to focus on this for the next 2 weeks and we're going to improve on it. And, like you said, that does make you want to train under someone like that. It's the caring side of someone, and the idea that a coach can own up to the fact that they didn't cover this aspect, and it's not, God, you were terrible, blah, 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 blah. And I think that's really important, which brings me to yourself as a coach, because I know we're going to talk about the gym that you've opened up this week. I know this will be out a couple of weeks and we'll go back in time. It's kind of like a back to the future situation all the time with this podcast. But how did you find your voice as a coach then? Because obviously you were training MMA for a long time before you became a coach. How did you, did you overthink it? Were you anxious about becoming a coach?
I was extremely anxious about being a coach. Um, uh, I was always going to be a coach.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it like at the heart. So I was like, this is really what I'm gonna like. Even when I was fighting to be a better coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I always had that in mind as something that eventually I wanted to do. I thought I would have to go further in my fighting career to get to the point where I felt happy putting my fighting career to bed a little bit. And I'm not saying I won't ever fight again, but I'm not going to be fighting as seriously as I
Mm-hmm.
was when I was just purely a fighter. I think the relationship between a fighter and a coach is such an interesting one. A fighter is someone who is purely selfish, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think a lot of people put that as, just selfish, rotten. But they're a selfish person because they put everything into being a better person. So they focus, everything is on that. They eat the right times, they train at the right times, they go to sleep at the right times, and a lot of times other people around them lose time with them because they're that person. And a coach is the reverse of that. A coach is someone who gives and pours into another person, and doesn't ask for a whole lot back from that person. And when I was fighting, I was coaching fighting at the same time. And I found they very, very much conflicted
Yeah.
because when I was in a fighter mode, I was like, there's part of me that was like, go away and focus on myself. I don't need to answer your questions. And then when I was a coach, I just wanted to help everybody. I could, like, if someone came over to me and was like, that technique you showed last week, it worked for me 6, 7 times. It was amazing. It's made everything so much better. And I get like such an uplifting feeling from that. But once I finally decided that I wanted to make that transition from fighting to coaching, I was very anxious about, like, the start of it. I was like, I wasn't sure, like, could I make it? I wasn't sure if I had enough money to start. You see what's around you, but one of the big differences I think between Kieran and Martin and me is Kieran and Martin didn't have Kieran and Martin. I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And this is giving me a major, like, start straight off the bat. I've seen them put the gym together
Mm-hmm.
from square one. I've seen them, struggle when they didn't have that many members, and then they had to build their way up, and they're a huge success now. But a lot of people see them only as they are now.
Yeah.
They don't see, um, like, in Tullamore, we were only joking there recently about the fact that there used to be 3 holes in the wall, two that Chris Lunam put straight in the wall, and one that Liam McLaughlin tried to hit me with a Superman punch, jumping off the wall and put his foot straight through,
Bloody
through
yeah.
the wall. um, uh, there was a day the lights went out in the place, and we trained literally in the dark with lads with phones turning their light on in their phone
Wow.
just to train. We were that desperate to train. And we trained when it wasn't as big as it was. It wasn't
Yeah.
as successful as it was, and we loved it just as passionately back then as we do now. The only thing that's changed is the drapes. The only thing that's changed is the surroundings,
Yeah.
and you can, like, you can feel that of Kieran, you can feel that of Martin. Other people that maybe came along later, they don't realize that that's where they came from. But when I start, I have that same feeling. It's like, it is a small start. It's a few mats. putting down, we're training. But everybody in that room is so passionate about martial arts, incredible. And that's something that I wouldn't trade for anything. And anybody that does join the Jays, that in 10 years' time, they're going to be telling stories about that they were here before it was as big as it was.
It's it's a brilliant way of looking at it, the way you mentioned about, you know, Martin, Kieran and Martin didn't have Kieran and Martin, but you have Kieran and Martin to talk about. And I know that they, you know, would have given you advice and things. It's still for yourself a massive jump to be, you know, to be opening somewhere new. Obviously it's over in Ballinasloe. Your first night, as we're talking, was just last Wednesday. Just in the lead up to it, say in the week up to it, how were you feeling?
I judge the direction I go in my life on based on how much I'm panicking about it.
Yeah,
If I'm not worried, it's
yeah,
not where I should be. If you go and you ask a girl out and you're like, I don't care if she says yes or no. Probably shouldn't have asked her.
fair, yeah.
If you go to a fight and you're like, if I win or lose, no big deal.
Mm,
Probably shouldn't be fighting. If you go to a jiu-jitsu competition, you're like, let's see how it goes. I don't care. Probably shouldn't be doing it.
yeah.
And if you open a business and you're like, if it succeeds or it fails, I don't mind. You shouldn't open that business.
Mm,
I am terrified that it's going to fail all
mm,
of the time, and that means that I know I'm doing the right thing, and I will always judge my life on that. People are obsessed with comfort,
yeah,
and it's honestly, it's the enemy of the great.
yeah.
Being comfortable, always talking to the same people, always eating the same food, always uh, passing through the same groups. It's it holds you back from being the person you really want to be. And I do want to be one of the greatest coaches that ever lived, and that's for me, that might mean something different than what another person thinks a great coach is.
Yeah.
I think a great coach is someone who genuinely impacts people's lives and makes them better. That might be because I'm training someone who's an incredible fighter, which I'm definitely going to be doing, or that might mean that someone who is nervous and shy, who enters the gym with eyes down towards the floor and doesn't know how to talk to anybody, that in 5 6 months he has a big smile on his face, he's talking to everybody. And on top of that, and I think this is probably one of the most beautiful things about martial arts, he's helping everybody that's uncomfortable in the gym
Mm,
feel more comfortable with themselves. So he's going full circle. And it was the same for me when I did martial arts, shy, quiet, didn't know what to do with myself. And now I'm the person that when someone's shy and quiet, I'm like, don't worry about it. I've been there. Let
mm,
me show you the way. A lot of times people see you just as you are right now and they think, oh, Andrew did all of this. It's so incredible. I don't believe I can do it. And then they hear a story, about a nerdy little 12-year-old that started combat sports, and they realize, like, my God, like, I had a better start than he did. Of
yeah.
course I can do it, and I think that's something that's always going to be important as a coach, as a teacher, is making the next generation better faster than you were meant. And it will always be because you're standing on the shoulders of giants. You're standing on the shoulders of people that came before you. And I want to make everybody that comes into my gym not as good as me as a fighter, but better than me as a fighter.
It's a it's a thing we spoke about when Kieran was on. He puts himself in these really bad positions in jiu-jitsu and hopes that he gets out. You know, obviously, like hope is probably not the word he used, but in the idea of this, that he puts himself in those positions and knows, well, I might get tapped here or I might
Mm-hmm.
get out, but the whole point is to get better at it. And like, I want to see that when my coach, whoever my coach is, I want to see them get better as well as me get better, and for them to progress. Because what I see with someone like Martin, who's been my coach for 6 years, is he's seen me like at my mental health wise at my absolute lowest, my absolute highest. All the stuff in between with anxiety and the stuff that happens outside the gym, which you bring in and you tell your coach, because they're almost like a therapist too. And and they're they're a friend, they're a therapist, they're a coach, they're a doctor, they're all these things that they could be. And they take that on with everyone. Like when you look outside, obviously you see yourself going to your coach, talking, I'm having a terrible day, whatever, I lost my keys, whatever it might be. Everybody's doing the same thing to them. So they're taking on this role of all these kind of outside problems. And like, we're looking up to you, Andrew, like, to be like a problem solver in other aspects. But what I think, even just chatting to you now for the last 40 minutes, whatever, is like, I would think that you'd be an exceptional person for that, coach or otherwise. I think you'd be an exceptional person to approach about. Look, I'm Andrew today. I'm just having a really tough day, and I'm struggling. Like, I would put my faith in you, like, just listen to you talk about that, because you're obviously someone who thinks deeply about it. Um, does that outside thing not worry you, but like make you think like I have to always be continuing my own developments, in my head, not just kickboxing and fighting, because that these younger people there's no way around it. Like, they'll look up to you.
Yeah, I do think that a lot of times when I'm learning a new technique, when I'm improving or I'm training myself, I am training for my future students, that maybe haven't even met you yet, but I'm trying to get better for you. But something that I think is really important for people to understand, because I think a lot of times people put coaches up on a pedestal, is like, we're exceptionally ordinary people.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes they're the people you need more than anything else, because if you do feel like that person is out of your reach, that person, you'll never be able to be like that person. Um, that will hold you back from striving to be better. And I always think of that with, my grandfather. My grandfather was a big, influence on me when I was younger. He was a farmer. He was a hard worker. He worked until, like, the day he passed away. And he was someone that was absolutely, completely ordinary.
Mm.
There's nothing extraordinary about what he did, but what he did do is, from a very young age, is he let a young boy know that a man was someone that took care of his people, that looked after his people, and worked hard. And those two things sound so ordinary to so many people, but if he wasn't there when he was there, I don't know how I would have turned out. And I think a coach needs to mimic that to other people. He
Yeah.
needs to let people know that he's just like you. He's suffering through all the same things you're suffering through, or he has suffered through all the things you've suffered through, so that you feel comfortable and open enough to bring those problems to that
Yeah.
person. Um, Martial arts is something that brings a lot of people together of a lot of different personalities, and while a lot of times it can feel like a mess, it's a beautiful, beautiful mess.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change it for anything.
So how was the first week then, with actually in the gym? How did you get on?
So the first week was incredible. The first Wednesday, I was panicked. I was nervous about everything. There was great numbers. There was over 20 people there, and we got some really good training and introduced a lot of people to martial arts. But like a lot of things, like what I expected is, the first day is going to be madness. The second day is going to be the day where you see the real martial artists in the group. You see the people who are really passionate about this. And the second day, we had 8 people in the gym, but every single person that there was a pleasure to teach. They were passionate about everything they were showed. Their minds were blown by all these techniques that, you know, maybe they'd seen in a fight, but they never really understood why they worked. And
Yeah.
I was someone like that when I was younger. I was very curious. I wanted to know, you know, I didn't want to know like what was happening. I wanted to know why it was happening.
Yeah.
I wanted to understand why it all happened like that. And that you know, that feeling, you know, I always say, to people that I'm around, I always say I'm feeling good whenever whenever I know I'm in the right place.
Yeah.
Like, and Friday was the first day that I was like, there's no place in this entire world that if you offered me to be anywhere else, I need to be here.
Mm.
And that's so important to me. And I knew I was doing the right thing on Friday. I just knew I was.
I was talking to your mom. I hope she doesn't mind me mentioning her, but
Yeah, no.
she's started training on a Monday over with us. But obviously,
Hmm.
I wanted to ask her how you were, you know, how you're getting on. You know, I was talking to her Monday and stuff, and she said something that you said to her, and I kind of sums it up really well. I think that you just said that as long as the rent and everything else is covered, after that, you know, that was the main. Once that bit's out of the way, you just wanted people to come in and learn. And
Yeah.
you know, it is a massive step for you to go from, like we mentioned, to go from, oh, you obviously were teaching over in Tullamore to start in your own place. And um, I can't imagine myself doing it, but that's not to say like I'm not going to be one of those people say I couldn't do it, because people will say, of course you couldn't. You could. You know, it's not about me like talking about that, but it's the idea of standing up there in front of people. Um, it can be daunting anyway. And I
Hmm.
know that I've seen you talk before on, say, on channels on YouTube before a fight. And I've always loved watching it, because you're on one side of the screen and your opponent's on the other, and your opponent might be doing the whole maybe Conor McGregor influence talk, you know, that kind of thing. And you're on the other side just saying, well, I'm going to go in there and I'm better than him, so I'm just going to beat him. And it's not like flamboyant or anything like that, but your sense of assurity in it, like the way you deliver it. And this kind of goes into this sounds like this started when you were 10 years old, that you
Hmm.
were kind of figuring this stuff out. And
Yeah.
that's amazing to me, because a lot of the time, a lot of us are dossing when we're 10 years old. You know what I mean? But you were already figuring out what you were, and um, like you said, what you want to be. And now you've achieved this kind of thing. Can you allow yourself to feel comfortable at any point?
Um, like for me, I think comfort gets old really quickly. You
Yeah.
know, I always think of like when you're training. I'm sure most people who train regularly, who train really hard, like I do, probably feel the same way. Maybe you get sick or something,
Mm.
and you go, you know, you have a good reason not to train, and you go, phew, and you sit down and you relax, and then for the first like day or maybe even 2 days, you go, isn't this great? Get to watch some Netflix, get to chill out, you know, take things easy, watch a few videos. And then day three hits and you go, this isn't for me. Like, he's like, I can't wait till I get better. I'm so frustrated. Like, why am I not, you know, constantly progressing? And I think one of the things that a lot of people, you know, will understand is that like if you're not improving, if you're not striving or feeling like you're getting better at something, whatever that might be, whether that be, you know, music, whether that be fighting, whether that be, you know, art, or a business, you feel like all of your rest is for nothing.
Mm.
Rest only feels like rest when it's after a hard day's
Yeah.
work. You know, you can only take a rest on a Sunday when you worked the rest of the week. If not, then it's not a rest; it's your life.
Yeah.
And I never want to be that person that you know, that that sit back. I want to be the person who leads from the front lines, who doesn't shout and bark orders from the back telling people what to do. I want to be the person that jumps in and inspires my students, that shows them what they can be, shows them why these techniques work. Because a lot of what being a martial arts coach is instilling confidence in people. You know, when you teach a technique, if I teach it and I tell you this is really good and it works sometimes, but like probably won't work for you. Like you're not even going to try it. You're gonna go halfway through it and you're gonna give up.
Yeah.
Where if I go, I've tried this at every level of competition, and I've caught every color belt under the sun, and I've grinded away and proven not just to you but to myself that this works. So this is the way I do it. You're gonna come away going like, I'm gonna fight tooth and nail for that. This works. You know, I believe in this.
Absolutely. So if someone was listening to this now, and it's important to say young or old, because I think, you know, people think, oh, it's a young man's game, this fighting monarchy. And I know that you teach jiu-jitsu for an hour and then you teach kickboxing for an hour. Is that right? So,
yeah.
So I think it's good to get across the point now. I started when I was 35 and I only do jiu-jitsu because I thought I'm not getting punched in the face. I don't have any real need for it now. I've avoided it for 35 years. I got a couple of punches in the face, but I that was my own fault. But it's important for jiu-jitsu on my side, and you can tell me from kind of MMA and kickbox from the other side, that if you're 35, 40, whatever it is, jiu-jitsu is like a perfect sport, because I think the idea that you can pick your own game plan, you can have, like, I'll go in there and there'll be some young lad with so much more energy than me and so much more flexibility, speed, just doing cartwheels over me and stuff. And I can sit there and think, that's fine for the first 2 minutes, but then I'm going to get you. Yeah. And I think it's so important, because young people will always be drawn to MMA. I think it's particularly like something that people, you know, it's so popular now as well. Obviously, that's one of the reasons, but also it's kind of a primal kind of activity, you know, that we want to get involved in, whether it's jiu-jitsu or kickboxing. But I just think I can't talk about jiu-jitsu enough for the mental health benefits that I've had with regards to, and you'll know this, Andrew, if you're in a 5-minute roll, there's nothing happening apart from that roll. And that's the only time I felt that in the past 20 years or so, and I was hypnotized by a guest I had on, and that was amazing. And I didn't believe in that stuff. And all of a sudden I was like, that was weird. But in jiu-jitsu, for those 5 minutes, anxiety departs, like, because you're not like anxious within the role in training. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I want to catch the person. I don't want to be caught. And that's basically what it boils down to. And you want to get better in the roles and stuff. But all I wanted was anxiety to go at some point. Mm-hmm. And every time I roll and every day I'm in there, it goes. Like, I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah. Yeah. You're feeling good.
Yeah.
You know, you're in the right place. You know, you're doing the right thing in that moment. You wouldn't be anywhere else. You're not thinking about anything else. Not worried about taxes when you're in the middle of a roll. I will try to convince you.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I will say, you definitely should do kickboxing.
Okay, let's go.
If you haven't done it. The first thing I'll say to you is, people that limit themselves by, you know, oh, I can't handle such. You couldn't handle a lot of what was in jiu-jitsu before you did jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And now you look back at yourself and you're like, my God, wasn't I so ridiculous that I thought that about myself? Like, I'm such a stronger person than I give myself credit.
Yeah.
The second thing I'll say to you about getting hit is, there is ways to work around getting hit, but I'll be honest, I have never got hit harder in jiu-jitsu than I ever have in kickboxing. You know, elbows astray, knees astray. Honestly, I don't get hit that hard in kickboxing. If you're with the right coach, and Martin most certainly is the right coach, you definitely can do that, and I would highly encourage you to do it. I will say to everybody that, and I implore you to it. And I don't care if you're close to Ballinasloe and you want to train with me, or if you're in Dublin and you want to train in CMAC in Dublin, or if you're in England and you want to train somewhere in England. No matter where you are in the world, martial arts will change your life and make them better. You should do it. I don't care what age you are. I don't care if you're male or if you're female. I don't care if you're awkward or confident. It will make your life better. The first day is the hardest
Yeah,
day. It's the
yeah,
day that struggle with more than anything else. Every day after it gets better. If you do your first day and you kind of like it, well, strap in, because you're gonna love it once it gets that bit better every single day afterwards. And it does, honestly, it gets better every single day that you do it. The first day you come in and you don't know, your elbow from your knee, and people are explaining stuff to you, and you're like, you expect me to know all these code
yeah.
words that you're throwing out to me. And then give it a few weeks and you feel like a completely different person afterwards. Martial arts changed my life, and honestly, I'm not sure I'd be here if it wasn't for martial arts. And I've seen it change so many people's lives in so many incredible ways. I think it's one of the most powerful tools we have, to make people's lives better. And I honestly, truly suggest it for every single person.
And the the people in martial arts are like the soundest and coolest people. I think what my idea would have been I would have been influenced by outside sources, whether it's on TV or whatever it might have been in films, and the idea that it was all macho and everybody had a big ego.
Mm.
And, if you went in there, someone's going to slap you around on the first day, and everything about any idea I had of it was incorrect. Like, it couldn't have been further from the truth, with the idea that everybody was nice. Everybody wanted you to help, or everybody wanted to help, but also, I don't know if you did this. I used to say this the whole time when I was in there. I'd say like, no, I'm holding someone back. Or, if I was drilling with someone and wasn't getting the technique, I'd be like, and everybody was like, but we've all been in this situation.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
yeah.
normal. It's like nobody expects you to come in and pull off, a rear naked choke first day, and you're done. Well, I know that bit now. I don't need to go back. It's a bit more complicated than that. But the idea as well as kickboxing, because I thought then, well, the jiu-jitsu lads are sound, and the kickboxing fellas must be the ones that are like, the ego and the big tough
Yeah,
guy.
yeah.
And it wasn't.
Tattooed, angry,
Yeah,
steroid
yeah,
heads.
like they were all just going to kill each other. And then I watched a drill sparring session, and it was art, like,
Playing and laughing with each other.
yeah. But
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like you said, it's art, like that. The movement of being able to connect with people, like fist, foot, whatever it might be, but holding them, you're not actually smacking the people around the place. There's an art to that in itself. But just watching how people moved around the mats, and helped each other as well, because there was obviously people who knew people in there. It's an amazing community to be part of. And like you said, like, I don't know where I'd be without it now. Back when I was 35, I was like, let's do something new. I've got to get out of this terrible depression that I'm in. And like, my friend said, go in there and see what it's like. And it took me 3 months to be convinced to actually get in the door. But, like
But
you
you're
said,
shorter than a lot of people, to be
yeah,
honest.
yeah, well, that's true. But
Most
look,
people take years.
yeah, they do. But like you said, if people are in Ballinasloe and this, head down to Andrew and just experience it. Like, because as you said, Andrew, even if you just like it a little bit, go back the second day, and things will start opening up then. And when you get your first technique right, and you're like, oh, that was amazing. And you get like a first submission, or you roll with a colored belt and you don't get tapped. Everything's like this little thing of progression that you
Yeah.
see. You don't see that in regular, like, in inverted commas, regular life, where we're just walking around. You don't see those kind of improvements. I did want to ask you this, because I've asked everybody who's come on who's done MMA, and both of all the different arts within the martial arts. Do you prefer stand up or on the ground?
Like,
If you had to
like
choose now, I know you can. I know,
no,
Andrew, you can just say I love both, but that's a cop out.
no, like it's he called me out straight
Yeah,
straight live.
they do it all the time.
Yeah, no, like asking, like that feels like showing me a painting and
Yeah,
asking which is your favorite color.
but that's what I want to
Um,
know, though.
like I, the thing I find so interesting about martial arts is for 2 weeks I'll be obsessed with jiu-jitsu and it'll be all I can think of, and I'll do a bit of striking just to keep it together, and then I'll get bored with jiu-jitsu, and then the next 2 weeks all I can think about is kickboxing,
Mm,
and then the next 2 weeks all I'll be able to think about is wrestling, and it's the only thing that's been able to actually keep my attention, because if I was to do something, if I was to join a boxing gym, I would be bored out of my mind
yeah,
after 6 or 7 months. Um, there's no end to martial arts.
mm,
Me and you both know that if we were to sit here and pretend that we knew even half of the techniques that are in
yeah,
martial arts, we would be boasting, incredibly high. We far from that know that, and there's no black belt that's going to tell you that. There's no UFC champion that's going to tell you that. Um, uh, Martial arts is beautiful as a
yeah,
whole, and I don't see them separately,
yeah,
and it's why it actually kind of breaks my heart sometimes when I hear people say, um, I can only strike. I can only do
yeah,
jiu-jitsu. I'm like, they're so different and they're the same. Like they're if you get to go back, like I'm jealous of you right now. You get to go back and you get to experience the beginning of a martial arts journey
yeah.
when you start kickboxing all over again.
Well, we'll see,
Except
Andrew. Let's not book my first session just yet.
I've already booked it. I'm texting Martin right now. He knows. He
but
knows you're on the way.
but
And if you come down to me, you're gonna have to do at least one.
that is true, actually. No, I've already promised your mother that I'll be down. So there you go. But I want to like. I think that's the reason I asked the question, though, because I only know one of them, and I think I want you to say ground, because then it will prove that I'm doing the right. You know, I'm only copying this on now because the way you broke that down. So I think that's the reason, because when I watched UFC, I wanted to go to the ground, because then I'm like, now I understand what's going on. And you know, the kind of rise of the wrestling in UFC over the last couple of years. Now, it was always there, obviously, but then you see someone like Khabib and Makachev and those boys, and you see like, oh yeah, that's the reason that the ground stuff is better. They want to get at the ground, but obviously it's not true. Like, but in my mind, I'm creating this narrative that, oh, the groundwork, it's the only thing that matters. But I do know what you mean when you break it down like that. I'm seeing it two separate things, and it's a tough. It's like asking you, like, if you had two children, which is your favorite, and it's a bit, and like Sophie's Choice kind of a thing, and that's a bit cruel. But Andrew, something we always ask as well, like, what do you like to do in your spare time when you do get to relax from martial arts?
I there is nothing else. Genuinely, there is nothing else. Uh,
But do you
I
like, because
I drive my family nuts
okay,
because I watch martial arts videos on double speed to try to learn quicker than I was before.
to get through them,
A lot of the stuff is repeatable for me because I obviously know so much about martial arts as it is. But then every now and again, I hit on that golden nugget that I go, my God, that was the thing. When I rest and recover, I like, I remember one of my fighters, Ronan, was laughing at me because I was burnt out after his fight, and I hit the bed, and he saw me lying down watching boxing videos on double speed, and he was like, "That's how you relax," and I was like, genuinely, like, that's how I relax. Like, I don't. There are times where you have to turn your mind off and you have to do something else, but something that I think homeschooling has done for me is that I don't actually believe in work. I don't
right?
see things as work. there's a brilliant book on how to raise a genius. It's about someone who believed that geniuses were raised, that they weren't born.
Okay.
And he raised three daughters that were all high level chess champions. And one of the things he speaks on in the book in huge detail is that he never makes his daughters feel like chess is a chore they have to do to get something else. Chess is something that you do because you love doing it. And you would think that someone being so obsessed with one subject would make that person limited. But if you actually look at the three girls, you'll see that they have so much else going on in their life that they're really, really proficient in. Because if you are brilliant at one thing, if you learn the process of learning, it's very easy to transfer to everything else in your life. And I'm sure you know that maybe you've gone through the process of how you learn jujitsu, and then you apply it to podcasting,
Yeah.
or you learned it for podcasting and you applied it to jujitsu. There isn't as much separating these things as a lot of people think. Um, and that's the way I believe in it. I don't see martial arts as something that I have to work on. I see it as a pleasure. I don't see coaching as something. Don't I like my gym? Me opening a gym is not a job. It's a
Yeah.
passion
Yeah.
project.
Yeah.
It's something that I am pouring money into, and every bit of money that I get out, I'm gonna pour straight
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
it. I'm not putting it in my pocket. I don't have any interest in putting it in my pocket, because this is all that I want to do. And I think the people who are blessed enough to find that thing in their life that they were made for, and I was made to be a coach, will understand that.
Yeah.
That once you find that path, there's nothing else.
I mean, if people don't go down to the gym now after this conversation, I don't know. Come on, but like, where can people find you, Andrew? Obviously, in person, but also on your social media and stuff like that.
Yes. So Andrew Barrett on Instagram, and the King's Court Academy is the gym's name. So I will highly suggest to follow that. Even if you're just going to drop down for a night, you
Yeah.
just want to see what it's like. Um, uh, Again, I always say, please don't judge a book by its cover. Don't look at martial arts or what you think martial arts is, or watch a single UFC fight and then convince yourself that that's what training is like.
Yeah.
They're very, very different things. And I don't think there's a man, woman, or child who shouldn't be doing it. Like, please, if you have any questions, get in contact with me. I'll be more than happy to get back to you. My dream is to get as many people into martial arts as I can. So I'm more than willing and happy to help anybody out that I can.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important point to make, is like, go down for a night and see how it is. Because you're going to have these preconceived notions about MMA, martial arts, jiu-jitsu, whatever it might be. You won't know until you actually go there and take part in an actual session to see, and you'll probably end up loving it. Andrew, you've been a fantastic guest. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me on, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to get the word out.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, hang on if you don't mind. We always do this little thing where I close it out. We get a photo just for the promo stuff. And I'll be able to put up the, King's Court Academy, all that stuff on Instagram as well, like to get it out there when we're doing the episode. But let me close this out. I want to also say thanks to John Francis for his technical abilities, as every week he manages to get the stuff. That one week where I tried to do it myself without his help because he was getting married, shambles. I want to say thanks to my mum, my dad, my granddad, as always, Jurgen Calvin for the logo and the music. We're on YouTube. Subscribe if you would. Facebook, Instagram, and X. I think I'll come off X. We're also on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google Podcasts, all the podcast platforms and all that. Andrew, once again, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank
All
you.
right, everyone else, see you next week. Take care. Bye.